let's just make a proper introduction to the report you just released, because what I love about these types of reports is not so much do I think this scenario will be true, but it gives you a framework to work from. So if you clearly understand these scenarios, and I'm guessing a lot of people right now dealing with COVID the last years who didn't have the right insurance would have loved to have this report 2 years before, right?
Yes. So as I think we addressed a few times already, most thinking is linear. It's like yesterday looks a lot like what we expect tomorrow to look like. And that is fine for everyday needs. But if you are a board looking 10 years into the horizon, you're a central bank looking at downside risk or systemic risk, you need to create a framework where you look at events which have a small, 5 to 10%, 15% likelihood, but if they do happen, have a significant impact in terms of what happens. And that's been the basis of this report, which I initiated 20 years ago. First time with 8 journalists in a restaurant, a seafood restaurant in Copenhagen. Now it's a global entity. Today alone, I've done 10 interviews with this. I've been Bloomberg, CNBC, CNA, Singapore TV, BBC TV. All of this is now globally. Why does it have an appeal? Exactly because, as you say, people are starting to understand this is not about us telling you what will happen. It's about us telling you this year there is a hypersonic a global race going on. We are telling you that it is very likely inside the next couple of years that we will be having an ability to live on average 25 years longer. We think that women will rise to the occasion and finally claim their spot in terms of not only wages but also the amount of people in C-suites and boards. We think that the inflation in the US could go to 15%. We think that India and the GCC countries can create a new strategic alliance underneath the umbrella that globalization is breaking down. So why are we doing this? We're doing this because this is not something people want to discuss unless you take the format out of today's world, out of today's decision, say, okay, Chris, why don't we have a conversation about what may not or may not happen? There has no consequences. It is just me trying to do the opposite of numbing your brain. I'm trying to activate your brain cells and saying, tell me why I'm wrong. I mean, I'm really through this publication, we're trying to challenge people to tell us why we are wrong. And what turns out to be the case is that people get as animated and involved as I am right now talking to you, Chris, because it's just super interesting. It is really the most fun. I mean, if you go to a dinner table, to a dinner conversation, do you want to hang out with all your friends that all supports Tromsø FC, or do you want to go to someone that says, listen, Tromsø is okay, it's a shitty place with a shitty stadium, but I really think that Stavanger, whatever they're called in Stavanger, is a better team. You want the conversation, and you want respectfully be able to express your view. And every time I engage in these dinner conversations, client conversations, I never walk away from any meeting where I'm not 1, 2, 3% more informed. I may not be smarter, but I'm more informed, and I have a better balance in my own view of the world. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Couldn't agree more. Let's just dive into one topic.
The Tromsø part you agreed on, yeah?
Your research is amazing. I was like, it's the first time any guest have managed to figure that out. But let's talk about inflation. Just because I saw the president of the European Central Bank today say that we know you guys are worried about inflation, but it will decline in 2022. So it seems like the perfect quote to take the report and the comments made in the report and pair that up with Christine Lagarde's comments today.
There is nowhere in the world where the gap between perception and reality is wider than with Miss Lagarde. She is, by any standard deviation, the most incompetent central banker ever in history. And she runs a group of people who, just across the border in Poland, Czech, and in Hungary, is seeing central banks hiking interest rate 100, 200, 300 basis point. You have a country like Poland having runaway inflation. I mean, Poland is the second most populous country, as far as I know, in Europe. They are in total denial, so much so that one of the outrageous calls should have been that the ECB hikes interest rate 2 or 3 times next year. New German government comes in. They are instituting a green policy. They're closing down the Nord Stream 2. energy prices go through the roof, ECB is forced to hike. She will be forced to hike anytime next year. And she's just a classic example of what we should not try to achieve. I mean, I know we call the viewers don't know that, but the theme right this year is revolution. And Thomas Jefferson, the former American president, famously once said, you need a revolution every 20 years to keep the government honest. I'll say you need a revolution every 5 years to keep the central banks honest. They are the most incompetent bunch I've ever seen in my over 30 years. They are living the pipe dream, despite the fact her colleagues across in the US, her colleagues in the UK, her colleagues the rest of the world now are fully submitting to the fact that we have a inflation which is sticky.
What's the end game here? Is it impossible to predict, or do you see any milestones that could happen next year?
No, I mean, when you get as old as I am, you tend to feel that you think you are smarter in terms of the amount of information you have, but you also know you know less about what will transpire into the future because your question really raises the mathematical decision tree, right? Because it's all path dependent. So let's say just run through one or two of these paths. If I'm right about the energy crisis this year, the winter being very cold, then you have an inflation pressure that means almost, by definition, they will have to hike rates. If you have a very mild winter, if you have the fact that they're similar to what's happened to coal prices in China, you're able to contain it. You have fiscal push all of a sudden being agreed. Then you have consumer spending going on. So you can see, you know, you can easily arrive at a conclusion, but the again similar to our conversation about green transformation, how you get there is far more important for you as a trader, as an investor, than the end goal. Even if I told you right now, Chris, what Fed 10-year US interest rate was going to be at the end of 2022, it wouldn't give you any ability to actually do anything. Because is it where it is because the inflation has gone up, or is it because nominal growth is going up, real growth is going up, or is it because the wages are going up? You don't know what the composition of the number is, despite the fact, every single day people are just sitting there, watching what is 10 years doing, what's the Nasdaq doing, and the likes. So there's too many paths that we can travel to get to that road, and that is exactly why you put probability to it instead.
Makes sense. We need to discuss crypto a bit, but can we just start before we dive into crypto? Just explain why fiat system is a belief system at the start, and because if we understand that concept, it's easier to take that concept over to crypto again.
I don't think you need to do that, but I'm happy to entertain that question. Fiat money is basically that, you know, no, when you have a Norwegian 100 kroner note in your hand, you are fiat to be believed. Fiat means to be believed in Latin. So to be believed that you will actually get 100 krona worth of value from using and owning that note. What it's really built on is essentially that the Norwegian government is able to tax someone enough money to create a proceed that undermines that money. But it's a fate system. I don't know. You probably know this, but it's not a trick question. But do you know what it says on a $1 note in the U.S.?
Something with God, believe, or something religious.
In God we trust, and that's all the fiat you get. So I hope you are a God-fearing person. No disrespect to people who believe in God, but you really need to believe in God if you believe in money, transaction money, physical money. You need to believe in God because the government's certainly not going to be gods if they don't want to live up to that obligation. So that's the fiat money. It's a belief system built on the fact that government ultimately can tax people in a country to sustain the value to a large extent of the value and the 100 Norwegian kroner note that we talk about here.